Welcome back to lesson 2 of a star quilt tutorial with me, Deb, your host. If you haven't had the chance yet to go to Quilting Perfectly Imperfect Points on Facebook, please go ahead and go over there and download your planning sheets. There's bigger ones or smaller ones. This is an 8x8. I'm actually cutting out for 2 today because they're the same colors. I have on my ironing board what I call an ugly sheet. It's just a piece of fabric to cover my ironing board because we're doing some super heavy starching. Not that we're going to super heavy at one time, but I don't like to overspray on my quilt board. The less often I have to wash that, the better. Okay, so in your iron, you want to use distilled water when you're pressing your fabrics. You're going to press the length of the fabric, not the width. The width is from selvage to selvage. The width is what you've had cut off of the bolt. The reason being for this is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump the camera. From selvage to selvage, or for the length, going up and down the length, there isn't much pull. Let me see if I can go in closer here. There isn't much pull in that at all. I'm pulling pretty strong and it doesn't want to go. But if you go from selvage to selvage, you ready? There's actually quite a bit of give there. And if you go on the bias, obviously there's a lot more give. The bias is the diagonal of the fabric. We'll get into that later when we get into our binding. But we're going to be cutting on the bias as well. So this is why we want to do a good starch. So this is my length of the cut. Hello, Mr. Clausby Kitty. He decided to jump up on the chair there and say hello to everybody, I guess. I don't know if you can see him barely in the corner there. So side to side, well actually it's up and down, but because the way it's on my ironing board, I'm going side to side. First, with a little bit of steam, give it the initial press. Now we have the wonderful middle. No, you may not come up here. Not allowed. Thank you, sir. Fabric has a memory of the last place it was cooled. That's why the clothes that come out of the dryer that are all wrinkly and cool do not get unwrinkled until you iron them or throw them back in the wash. I'm going to let that cool just a second. This is more of a real time. We're not in a hurry. And hello, train. It's the afternoon train going by. It's mid-morning, I guess. What time is it? Oh, it's almost noon. It's 11:35. Alright, so once you have it, your first press, if you're using a spray starch can like this one and not the bottle, you want to make sure you shake and shake it well. And because it has this lip in here, each time you shake, don't shake it near your quilt, because look what I did, and I don't know if you can see it. I don't think the camera's picking it up. It leaves little dots, and those dots sometimes like to show up. Now you're not going to spray so heavy it's going to make your fabric wet. You're going to spray it lightly. That's why you want to shake up your can and get some pressure in there and give it a spray. If you spray pretty heavy, I'll show you after we're done with this piece, it takes longer. It is better to starch it 2 or 3 times actually, by flipping, starching one side, flipping it over, ironing, and then starching again and flipping it over. 2 or 3 times that way is much better than soaking your fabric. You don't discolor your fabric that way, because it can happen. Remember, continuing side to side. And the very last run that we do is the longest run. And the reason we take our time with ironing and doing this chore is because the flatter, the better. Not just for sewing purposes, but for cutting purposes. Every step in quilting is just as important as the next. So we're going to move it down a little bit. It's that wonderful middle seam that always comes back, and I could never understand why, years ago, why that would always come back. You may not come up here, sir. That is not okay. And it was because I didn't let my fabric cool. I ironed it and moved it. Ironed it and moved it. And when I learned that fabric had a memory and took time to let it cool, is when I didn't see that crease come back anymore. And there's nothing worse, I think, than, because we're our own worst critics, of having a block and you can see that center crease. That just, no matter what you've done, it won't come out. So we're almost done with this side. I like to do a bare minimum, depending on my fabric. These fabrics, I've been only doing starching twice. Okay, so we're going to starch again. So we move our can away from our fabric so we don't splatter nothing. Shake it up real well. Light spray. Move it up the board. Give it a shake again. Nice good pressure so you get a nice fine mist. Yeah, I think we got that. And then when you iron it, you want to iron it till it's dry. And this is the side that's going to take us a bit. It's going to cool. And we need to let it cool very well. It also helps stopping your fabric from doing a lot of fraying. Oh, I forgot to take the steam off. What am I doing? Good job, Deborah Jean. Good job. Yeah, I like to, after I starch, just use a dry iron, go back and forth so it dries. Okay. No, sir, Mr. Clausby. And that's our Mr. Bill Clausby over there trying to come up on the board. Are you saying hi to everybody? Can you shake? You shake? Yep, he does shake actually. And he does give 5. He's part dog. He's a pretty good cat. I have a bed in here for him because he likes to be a part of everything. But he's been pretty good. He generally stays off my table, stays off of what I'm doing, because there is a bed, and he steals my robe, and I let him. I don't know why I was going to spray that again. So if you have an area that you quilt, whether it's the dining room, the kitchen, or if you have your own sewing area, sewing room, put a bed in there for your animals, especially your kitties, and put something of yours that they really like, or a cuddly blanket. It's pretty helpful. I think it has kept him quite content in my sewing adventures. Not like my last kitty. My last kitty, as soon as that machine went on, he thought he was going to sew right along with me. You know what we didn't do? We didn't let it cool, and it was right at that center mark. One more time, quick iron over the top. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt, but like I said, let this be just as important as your 1/4 inch seam, and you'll be much happier. It's your choice, obviously. I'm just trying to give you tips for better quilting experience and for an overall better look. And then we got that wonderful string on there. Clean house as we go. Got some orange. Oh, that's from the other stuff. And so there you have that for the ironing bit. I forgot to show you. Here's why we use the ugly cloth. I'm sure it looks like the camera's picking this up. Do you see this line? That's from Starch. I have some over here. And the other thing I was going to show you, so that's why we use the ugly cloth, so that way it's not all over. But you don't want to spray your fabric. See if the camera will pick it up. Once it soaks in, it might not. Maybe I didn't go up here. It's kind of a waste of fabric, but you don't want, when you're starching, for your fabric to be soaked and wet like this. It'll just stretch it and skew it more. It'll take longer for it to dry. So remember, if you're using an aerosol can, shake it well. Spray so lightly that you can't even barely see it. I'm going to change some things around and then we'll get to some cutting. Some cutting.